Welcome guys, and today I want to talk about an interesting concept. If you don't know me, my name is Magnus, and in this channel we talk about nostalgic games coming back to life with a particular highlight on the Shenmue franchise. Now, speaking of Shenmue, what would a movie be like? Shenmue the movie. How would a production studio adopt that movie and then take it forward, and what's the best way? That's what I want to talk about today. What's the best way to take Shenmue and introduce it to a larger audience by making a movie? First of all, I think introducing video game characters in the world of cinema is a huge risk, but can reap huge rewards if done the right way. Now, there's been a long concept of the fact that if you make a video game movie, it's destined to be bad and fail. It's kind of like this horrible curse. What we've seen with video game movies such as Sonic the Hedgehog, such as I'll even consider Wreck-It Ralph a video game movie, because Wreck-It Ralph had a lot of different video game characters. We've seen it with Pokemon as well, and Pokemon was not horrible. It was okay. I enjoyed Pokemon, and the fact is that you could build a good storyline if you stick close to the source material if you want as well, and then build from there, build excitement. It hasn't been done well in the past, specifically about directors who just want to take advantage of making video game movies specifically for tax benefits, and those that actually want to make video game movies and profit out of them. The Resident Evil franchise, in my opinion, was almost a great start, but then they just kind of like made it its own thing, which made a lot of money. It was the highest grossing video game franchise turned movie of all time. So there was a reason they made a bunch of movies, even though they just really deterred from the source material. But you can build something with the Shenmue franchise, and let me tell you what's the best way, in my opinion, on how to do it. Let's get started. So first, Sonic the Hedgehog started what I'd like to consider a Sega Cinematic Universe with potential. Now, you don't have to link Ryo Hazuki and his story with that, but what you do need to do is also build on the idea of really having a Sega Cinematic Universe. Now, you can start that with Ryo's story. First of all, it's got to be Paramount. I think Paramount did a great job in dealing with everything that had to be dealt with Sonic the Hedgehog, from realizing that their CG version of Sonic was a mess and that they really needed to listen to the fans, and then reworking it and actually working a story that served its audience to make us happy enough, and then threw in a role for Jim Carrey, a powerful actor, to actually kind of blossom and bloom in, which was amazing. I thought it rejuvenated the nostalgic Jim Carrey that we've wanted to see for years. So what you've got to do is at least work with Paramount, write this story, work with a director, Yu Suzuki, because he knows the complete story. He's got it pre-written for himself, and he wrote the story for video games. But then you need an actual movie director and excellent script writers who can break down the emotion of the story, break down what needs to actually be featured, what's important to the story, and cut away what doesn't really need to be added. Have more interesting situations. You need high impact for this type of movie. You need the martial arts scenes, because obviously I think it has to be built as a martial arts movie. But it also's got to have heart. It's got to have passion. It's got to have a few side storylines that you could definitely build in with his relationships with the different characters in the first Shenmue. But have it be different enough to where you actually can relate and see some new content. Don't change it too much from the original storyline, but change it just enough to where it seems that we're learning new things about the world of Yokosuka back in 1986. Now, that 1986 and early 1987. Now, that in itself would be great, but also work hand in hand with those involved with the storyline. So if us as fans know that you're adding content that couldn't make it to the games, but are integral to the story coming from the original director, we'll eat that up. Especially if they can actually be relevant and applied to the games itself, and that will bring more of us in. But what matters most is story. Make the story stand out. Make the action stand out. And that's not as important as story, but make it really make it heart and make it have action. And if you can get a director to do that without being too cheesy, but slip in those slight little comedic nuances that work so well in these type of movies, then I think you'd have a hit on your hands. Now, this is where it ties into the Sega Cinematic Universe. Now, many of us know that Shenmue, especially if you're a fan, and if you're watching me, you've got to be a fan. So I'm curious to know what you guys think of this. What needs to happen also, which would actually be more exciting and could generate a lot more revenue dollars, is to bring a connection of Shenmue to the world of Virtua Fighter and connect it to a Virtua Fighter possible movie. Now that would, Virtua Fighter movies and fighting franchise to make a movie is really difficult. That in itself is its own undertaking. But if you have little hints and nods to the Virtua Fighter franchise during the movie, sprinkled throughout, and then possibly a teaser, post-credit or mid-credit scene teaser, where, like, let's say as Ryo, if you decide to make the first movie solely based on the first Shenmue, let's say Ryo's sailing off to Hong Kong, and right when he gets to Hong Kong, he bumps into somebody, and the person he bumps into and then walks away is Akira. Now that in itself has so many different levels, because that would confirm that Akira and Ryo Hazuki are two separate characters, which we know, but that in itself would be so meta, right? Also, have it, and the fact that it should be a young Akira, but the fact that they bump into each other could also lead into the fact that, oh my gosh, are they making a Virtua Fighter movie? This movie was great. I'll watch this movie again, but the fact that they just kind of hinted towards Virtua Fighter right there tells you Sega Cinematic Universe, and it tells you we're going to see a Virtua Fighter movie. And that in itself, I mean, Virtua Fighter's storyline is, in my opinion, is not told as well as it could be in the actual games, and it didn't have to be, because Virtua Fighter in itself is a great game based off of just the engine. You hit start, you pick your character, you start fighting, ready, go. And they do have a back-end story. Each character has their own back-end story, but when you're playing the game, it's just all action. So maybe the movie in itself can be really action-oriented, exciting, but focus around maybe just a couple of characters. But it's got to have some depth. If you don't invest in depth, I can tell you the Sega Cinematic franchise would fail. Yeah, it would fail. It needs good writing, good story, and they've got to emphasize that just as important as sticking to the source material, which it has to do too. You stick to the source material, just like Marvel has done so well in doing, then you're going to really take off. Now, it doesn't have to be one-for-one copy-paste of the source material, because of course then you could have a jumbled mess, but at least make it close enough to where we're interested. And that's what I think would make a successful Shenmue game, and would get people who are not Shenmue fans excited that this movie is building on a Sega Cinematic Universe. And that in itself could scream money for not only Shenmue, but money for Sega themselves, money for anyone who's behind all of these projects. And it can honestly be successful because there was already excitement built around that after the Sega movie. So Sega's already got a head start. Let's keep that momentum going. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with me or not? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you for watching, and as always, you can make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys later.